Hello, welcome back to the Wire Podcast. I am your host, Ryan McCrary, and today I am excited to announce that I have officially released my NFL Draft Stats database. So if you do not know, I have a Patreon page, and on my Patreon, I have a premium stat sheet. It's just a little sheet that has 5 statistical databases for the NFL and the NBA, and today I released my NFL Draft Stats database. I did not expect to have this done so soon. I thought it would be I thought I would have this done a couple months from now. But no, I was able to get all this done really quickly, which I'm super excited about. If you want to go check it out, you can go to my Patreon page. It's on the link. It's in my link tree on my Instagram. I think it's also on my Twitter. And my Twitter and Instagram are both the Ryan McCrary. That's the RyanMCCRary. You can go to my Patreon. And for $5 a month, you can get access to all 5 of my statistical databases. But I want to go ahead and break down my database for the NFL Draft. It has a ton of information, and it includes a bunch of advanced stats in here. And so in these advanced stats, you may not be you may not be aware of, or you may not be used to. And so I want to go ahead and break it down so that if you do look at my database, if you do purchase it, that you won't be confused. And I think this is a very valuable stuff. I want to break down why this is important and why this stuff is valuable. Because I do think that this data, these stats, and all this information that's included in here is valuable. It helped me kind of identify some underrated prospects in last year's draft. I was a big fan of Cole Strange because of this database. I was a big fan of Leo Chenal because of this database. So I hope this helps you out, and I'm really excited about this database. And I can't wait to put the 2023 draft class into this. But we're a long way away from that. But without further ado, let's stop wasting time, and let's get into this database. So first off, I want to lay out what all is included in here. So for each position, or for all the players in this database, I have basic information, like obviously like what their name is, where they went to school, what conference they played in, what year they were in, like whether or not they were a senior, junior, were they a redshirt senior, were they a redshirt junior. I have their draft year, I have their draft capital, what pick they were, and what round they were picked in. That's very important. Draft capital is a huge indicator of how good a player will be. And then I have some grades from online sources like NFL.com. Lance Zierlein releases his grades for each prospect every year. That's included. SIS released their NFL Draft website, and so they have publicly available grades that are free. Those are available here. And the NFL.com also has these next-gen stats grades for each prospect, which are made using athleticism and production. So that's really cool. And then I have advanced stats. And then I have athletic testing numbers. I have each player's draft age. I have each player's RAS score, which is their relative athletic score, which is made using percentiles for each combine drill compared to every player's combine drill since, I don't know when this data goes back to, but it goes back around 30 years. So that's a lot. That stuff is very valuable. Then I have high school recruiting data, and this data isn't the most important, but I think it does matter how good these players were in high school, because the better you were at a younger age, the better. Like if you were really good in high school, and you were really good as a freshman, and you were just really good early, and then you continued being really good, that matters. So that's why that's important. And then I have PFF grades from their final season. And then I have what shows like their development curve in terms of their PFF grade, looking at breakout age. So it shows a breakout age in terms of how young they were when they first had a PFF grade of 70. And then I have how old they were when they first had a PFF grade of 80. And then I had what age they were when they first had a PFF grade of 90. Now, obviously, not every player has a PFF grade of 90 for a single season, but some do, and it shows how young they were or how old they were when they first achieved that. Then have a peak PFF grade, a PFF grade the last 2 years, and then their final season worth of PFF grades. So that's all included there. It's a ton of information. Like, when I say there's a ton of information here, I mean it. There is a lot of information here. Now I want to break down the advanced stats, and I want to start off with the quarterbacks. So, with the quarterbacks, I have some more common advanced stats like adjusted yards per attempt, passer rating, QBR, completion percentage, touchdown rate, interception rate, and then I have touchdown rate minus interception rate. But what I want to talk about is the market share data. Now, you might be wondering, what's market share data? Like, what does that mean? And basically, what market share stats are, it's basically take a particular stat for a player and divide it by the total team stats. So you can show what percentage of a certain stat a player recorded during their final season. So, for example, let's look at Malik Willis. So Malik Willis had a carry market share of 38.78% during his final season. And that means that he recorded 38.78% of his team's carries last season. That ranks first among all quarterbacks in last year's draft. And second was Sam Howell with a carry market share of 35.67%. Both of those marks are really good. And then I have like rush yards market share. I have rushing yards per attempt or rushing yards per carry. And then I have rushing touchdown market share. And I have that for all the quarterbacks for the 2022 NFL Draft. The reason why market share data is useful is because not every team has the same kind of offense or the same kind of defense. And so not every quarterback or not every player will have the same opportunities to record each stat. I recently, like a few months ago, I released an article on my website kind of breaking down or analyzing some of the top quarterbacks in the NFL and how they performed during the 2021-2022 season. And I used market share data. And one thing I realized is that, or one thing I noticed through writing that article is that Patrick Surtain, I almost forgot his name, Patrick Surtain recorded a lot less interceptions and pass deflections than J.C. Jackson and Trevon Diggs, but he was still very productive in terms of his pass deflections and his interceptions. The Broncos didn't record a ton of interceptions like the Cowboys did or the Patriots did. They recorded a lot fewer interceptions and passes defended, and because of that, Patrick Surtain was bound to have less passes defended and interceptions than J.C. Jackson and Trevon Diggs. So looking at stats this way kind of adjusts for that because players' stats and production will be influenced by their team's scheme or their team's play style. And so this kind of adjusts for that. And as we can see, looking at this kind of data, we can see that Malik Willis and Sam Howell were the most productive rushers out of last year's quarterbacks. Matt Corral was a distant third, and then a distant fourth was Desmond Ridder. Now let's go ahead and look at running backs. So for running backs, the stats I have included are a dominator rating, carry market share, rush yards market share, yards per carry, rushing touchdown market share, target market share, receiving yards market share, yards per reception, and receiving touchdown market share. Dominator is basically, let me look. Let me actually make sure I have this definition right. I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to give y'all inaccurate information. So let me get a playerprofiler.com real quick and just get the right definition for what dominator is. So dominator is, let me see, it's not pulling it up. All right, let me look. What is college dominator? dominator rating. Dominator rating represents a player's market share or his percentage of his team's offensive production. And that's basically what it is. And so, looking at running backs, the highest dominator rating among running backs in the 2022 NFL Draft was Kenneth Walker III with a dominator rating of 50.2%. So he had around 50.2% of his team's overall production. Second was Breece Hall. Third was Tyler Batty. Fourth was Rachaad White, and so on. And then for carry market share, number one was Breece Hall with a carry market share of 61.5%, of 61.56%. Number two was Tyler Batty, and number three was Tyler Allgeier. Kenneth Walker came in at fourth. And then for rushing yards market share, number one was Kenneth Walker III at 71.66%. Number two was Breece Hall at 70.74%. Number three was Tyler Batty. Number four was Tyler Allgeier. And then rushing yards per carry. Number one was Pierre Strong Jr. from South Dakota State with a mark of 7.03%. With a mark of 7.03. Number two was Zaquandre White from South Carolina at 6.6. James Cook was third at 6.4. And looking at rushing touchdown market share, number one was Breece Hall with a mark of 80%. Number two was Kenneth Walker III with a mark of 78.26%. And then number three was Tyler Allgeier with a mark of 76.7%. And then looking at receiving data at target market share, number one was Tyler Batty with 16.7%. Number two was Rachaad White at 16%. And then number three was Kyren Williams from Notre Dame with 10.8%. And then number four was Tyler Allgeier with a target market share of 10%. And then for receiving yards market share, number one by a lot was Rachaad White from Arizona State, 18.02%. Number two was Tyler Batty at 10.89%. And then number three was Kyren Williams at 9.78%. Also, Breece Hall came in at number four for this metric at 8.8%. And then yards per reception, number one was Ty Chandler at 14.4. Number two was Dameon Pierce at 11.4. And number three was Rachaad White at 10.6. And then for receiving touchdown market share, we have number one, Tyler Batty at 21.05%. Number two, Zaquandre White at 13.64%. Actually, two players are tied for 13.64%. That's Zaquandre White and Breece Hall. And then at number four, we got Dameon Pierce at 11.11%. So that is it for the running backs advanced stats. Now we can move on to wide receivers. And for wide receivers, we have a dominator rating, target market share, receiving yards market share, yards per reception, and receiving touchdowns market share. The leaders in dominator rating, number one was Jalen Tolbert from South Alabama. That might be Jalen Tolbert. I may have screwed that up. But he had a dominator rating of 51.2%. Treylon Burks comes in at second with a dominator rating of 45.9%. Then at number three, we have Sky Moore at 44.8%. Then number four, Jahan Dotson at 44.3%. And number five, Christian Watson at 44%. And then for target market share, also, one thing I want to note is that some of the smaller school guys in my database don't have all their advanced stats in here. For FCS guys, it is kind of difficult to find their stats. So that's why, with Christian Watson, he doesn't have a target market share. And then when we go to defense, Troy Anderson doesn't have all of his advanced stats in there because some of them I just could not find for the life of me. I'll try to find them, but I can't make any promises because stats are really difficult to find for FCS players. Now, continuing with the advanced stats for wide receivers, number one in target market share was Wan'Dale Robinson at 39.3%. Number two was Sky Moore at 36.7%. Number three was Jalen Tolbert at 33.4%. And number four was Jahan Dotson at 30%. And then number 5, Traylon Burks at 29.3%. Interesting here, Kyle Phillips from UCLA comes in at number 6 at 28.7%. That's interesting. And then receiving yards market share, we have, Jalen Tolbert at 47.98%. Number 2, Wan'Dale Robinson at 45.47%. At number 3, we got Traylon Burks at 39.7%. And then number 4, we got Sky Moore at 39.19%. Now let's look at yards per reception. So number 1 in yards per reception was Isaiah Weston from Northern Iowa at 23.9. Number 2, Jameson Williams from Alabama, 19.9. Number 3, Jalen Nailor, Michigan State, 18.8. And then number 4, we got Christian Watson from North Dakota State with 18.6. And to round out the wide receiver stats, we got receiving touchdown market share. Number 1, Traylon Burks with a mark of 50%. Number 2, Jahan Dotson, 48%. Number 3, Sky Moore, 43.48%. And then, once again, we got Kyle Phillips here at number 4 at 43.48%. So, Kyle Phillips and Sky Moore both tied in receiving touchdown market share at 43.48%. Alright, so now let's move on to tight ends. And for tight ends, it's pretty much the same as wide receivers. We got Dominator, target market share, receiving yards market share, yards per reception, and receiving touchdown market share. So for them, I got Dominator rating. Number 1 in Dominator rating is Trey McBride at 46.3%. He leads by a lot. Number 2 was Jelani Woods at 34.6%. Number 3 was Cade Otton, 31.8%, and number 4, Isaiah Likely, 31.4%. And then leaders in target market share, number 1 was Trey McBride at 34%. Number 2, Isaiah Likely, 24.3%. Number 3, Charlie Kolar at 21.6%. And then number 4, Jalen Wydermyer at 19.5%. Now looking at receiving yards market share, number 1 was Trey McBride, once again, 37.12%. Number two, Greg Dulcich, 26.71%. Number 3, Isaiah Likely, 26.38%. And then number 4, Charlie Kolar at 22.04%. Here are the leaders in yards per reception. At number 1, we got Greg Dulcich at 17.3. Number 2, Isaiah Likely at 15.5. Number 3, Jelani Woods at 13.6. And number 4, Jalen Wydermyer at 12.9. And here are the leaders in receiving touchdown market share. At number 1, we have Isaiah Likely at 36.36%. Number 2, we have Charlie Kolar at 27.27%. There's actually 2 players, or 2 tight ends tied at 27.27% receiving touchdown market share. That is Charlie Kolar and Jake Ferguson. And then at number 4, we have Jelani Woods at 25.81%. So those are the advanced stats for tight ends. There are no advanced stats like that for offensive tackle and interior defense, for offensive tackles and interior offensive linemen, unfortunately. So we can go ahead and move on to edge rushers. And now we are on the defensive side of the ball. Starting out with edge rushers, the market share stats I have for them are solo tackle market share, tackle for loss market share, and sack market share. So the leader in solo tackle market share for edge rushers was Jermaine Johnson II with a mark of 7.78%. At number 2, we have D'Angelo Malone at 7.56%. And then number 3, we got Aiden Hutchinson at 7.03%. The leaders in tackle for loss market share, number 1 by a mile, was Aiden Hutchinson with a mark of 39.3%. Very impressive. Number 2, we have Cameron Thomas with a mark of 23.84%. Number 3, we got Arnold Ebiketie at 21.95%. And number 4, we got D'Angelo Malone at 21.34%. Now, second market share, we have number 1, Aiden Hutchinson with a mark of 41.1%. And number 2, we have Arnold Ebiketie with a mark of 36.54%. That's very good. Number 3, we have Jermaine Johnson, 36.36%. And number 4, we got Kayvon Thibodeaux at 32.4%. And at number 5, we got David Ojabo at 32.35%. Very impressive. Now we can move on. Actually, hold up. I skipped interior defensive linemen. Duh. I don't know how I missed that. Almost skipped them. It's the same for them. We got solo tackle market share, tackle for loss market share, and sack market share. So the leader in solo tackle market share among interior defensive linemen was DeMarvin Leal at 5.72%. Then we got Logan Hall at 5.01%. At number 3, we got Neil Farrell Jr. at 4%. And then we have Inyoma Uwazurike from Iowa State at 3.76%. The leaders in tackle for loss market share, at number 1, we have DeMarvin Leal with a mark of 17.61%. At number 2, we have Zachary Carter at 15.13%. Number 3, we have Inyoma Uwazurike at 14.46%. And number 4, we have Logan Hall at 13.68%. And then the leaders among defensive tackles and sack market share. At number 1, we have Travis Jones from UConn at 37.5%. Number 2, Inyoma Uwazurike at 27.27%. Number 3, Zachary Carter, 22.22%. And number 4, DeMarvin Leal at 21.79%. So now we can move on to linebackers. And we got a lot more data for linebackers. We have solo tackle market share, tackle for loss market share, sack market share, and passes defended market share. So here are the leaders among linebackers in solo tackle market share. At 1, we have Damone Clark at 15.6%. Number 2, we have Chad Muma at 15.57%. At number 3, we have Malcolm Rodriguez at 13.79%. And number 4, we have Leo Chenal at 12.82%. And then at number 5, I want to mention Devin Lloyd at 11.76%. Here are the leaders in tackle for loss market share. At number 1, we have Micah McFadden at 26.72%. Number 2, Devin Lloyd at 22.68%. Number 3, Leo Chenal at 20.56%. Number 4, 17.7%. And number 5, Damone Clark at 15.31%. And then at sack market share, at number 1, we have Micah McFadden with a mark of 40.63%. Number 2, Leo Chenal, 21.05%. Number 3, Devin Lloyd, 19.51%. Number 4, Terrell Bernard at 17.86%. And number 5, DeMarco Jackson at 16.67%. And then here are the leaders in passes defended market share. Number 1, we have Brandon Smith at 10.42%. Then number 2 and number 3 tied for 10%. We got Devin Lloyd and DeMarco Jackson. Then at number 4, we have Nakobe Dean at 9.68%. And number 5, we have Malcolm Rodriguez at 8.89%. So those are all the advanced stats for the linebackers. And now we're going to move into the secondary. We got cornerbacks and safeties. Here are the leaders among cornerbacks in solo tackle market share. Number 1, we have Demarion Williams at 11.06%. Number 2, Cam Taylor-Britt at 8.12%. Number 3, Alontae Taylor at 8.06%. Number 4, Martin Emerson Jr. at 7.97%. And number 5, Marcus Jones at 7.52%. Here are the leaders in passes defended market share. Number 1, we have Roger McCreary at 31.82%. Number 2, Marcus Jones at 27.66%. Number 3, we have Cam Taylor-Britt at 25%. Number 4, we have Kyler Gordon at 21.88%. And at number 5, we have Kobe Bryant at 21.15%. And then for interception market share, number 1, we have Jermaine Waller at 40%. Number 2, we have Montaric Brown at 38.46%. At 3, we have Marcus Jones at 35.71%. And at number 4, we got Andrew Booth at 25%. And then we actually have 2 players tied at 25%. That's Andrew Booth Jr. and Darion Kendrick. So those are the leaders in the advanced stats for cornerbacks. Now moving on to safety. This is our final position. At number 1, for solo tackle market share, we have Brian Cook at 10.4%. Number 2, we have Jalen Petre at 10.26%. Number 3, we have Kirby Joseph at 8.45%. And then at 4, we have Lewis Cine at 8.25%. And then lastly, at number 5, we have Verone McKinley III at 8.24%. For tackle for loss market share, we have Jalen Petre at number 1 at 18.88%. Number 2, we have 9.89% for Smoke Monday. Number 3, we have Jaquan Brisker at 7.32%. Number 4, we have Daxton Hill at 6.43%. And at number 5, we have Nick Cross at 5.74%. And then for pass defended market share, number 1, we have Brian Cook at 17.31%. Number 2, Verone McKinley the third at 15.79%. At number 3, we have Daxton Hill at 15.1%. Number 4, we have Jalen Petre at 14.89%. And lastly, at number 5, we have Lewis Cine at 14.52%. And then for interception market share, number 1 is Kirby Joseph at 55.56%. Number 2 is Nick Cross at 50%. Number 3 is Verone McKinley III at 35.29%. 4 is JT Woods at 31.58%. And number 5 is Daxton Hill at 25%. So that wraps up the advanced stats for all the positions included in my database. Another thing I want to go over and break down for you. I have a I have a spreadsheet here with every position put together, where you can see what age every player in my database is. That's all in this section. It includes all this includes draft capital, online grades, athletic testing, basic information, athletic scores, high school recruiting data, PFF grades. All of this that can be found in the individual position pages is in the all position pages. All information is included except for the advanced stats. That's not included here. But you have every player in this database all in one place, so you can kind of compare their stats and their data that way. And then I have a little section called Player Profiles, and it has just basically all of every player's information just put into one spreadsheet, and it's got a list of names here. You can switch. So right now I have Trayvon Walker, and on this player profile it has his position, what team he played for, the conference he played in, what year he was in. So Trayvon Walker was a junior, so that's there. It has his draft year, what pick he was, what round he went in, his online grades, his basic information like his age, his height, weight, his hand size, and his arm length. Then it has his combine measurements, like his bench, his vertical, his broad jump, 40-yard dash, 20-yard split, 10-yard split, stuff like that. His RAS score, his high school recruiting data, his breakout, or his PFF grades, like his breakout age, for a PFF grade of 70, his breakout age at a PFF grade of 80, and his breakout age at a PFF grade of 90. And then we got his peak PFF grade, his PFF grade the last 2 years, and his I gotta change this, his final season PFF grade. So that is all included in the player profile. So that's basically all the information included here. It's a lot of stuff. Like I mentioned, I've mentioned that before. It's a lot of stuff. So I hope y'all find this useful, and I hope y'all really enjoy going through all these stats. It's really cool, in my opinion. Obviously, I made this, so I'm gonna say this, but I really hope y'all enjoy it. I hope y'all find it as fascinating as I do. I think this information is really useful for breaking down draft prospects. One thing before I go, I do want to mention is that the advanced stats are not the end-all be-all. Different players are going to produce differently at different ages. Not all players play for the same team. Not all players are the same age. Some players are at different points in their development, and their stats are going to reflect that. But I think looking at stats this way, in terms of like market share stats, is a decent way to look at production. I think it's a very good way to look at production, and that's not the best way to look at players. That's not the end all be all. Just because, um, Trayvon Walker didn't produce very well in terms of his market share stats, doesn't mean he's not going to be a very good player. Like, he was the first overall pick. He's a super good athlete. He's young. Like, because of all that, he has a chance to succeed despite not producing in college. You gotta look at these things in a nuanced way. Just because they didn't produce in college doesn't mean they won't produce in the NFL. All of this matters together. It's not just college production. It's not just the age. It's not just the size or the athleticism. It's all that put together. And kind of looking at all this data that way, not just looking at one thing, not just looking at the stats or the athleticism alone separately. You got to look at it all together to come up with your opinions. That's how I look at it, and that's how I would implore you to look at it as well. But that's all I have for y'all today. If you want to see more content from me, you can check out my website at thewiresports.com. You can check out my YouTube channel at The Wire. You can check out my TikTok page at thewire.sports. At the.wire.sports. You can check out my Twitter and my Instagram at the Ryan McCrary. That's the RYN MCCRARY. RYANMCCRARY. Sorry, for some reason I felt like I messed that up. You can check out my Patreon. The link is in my Twitter and my Instagram bio. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have for y'all today. I hope y'all enjoyed this podcast episode, and I will see y'all next time. Peace.